Hey everyone, this is Jerry with San Pedro Mastery. This video is the second part to last week's video that was called Perfect Peyote Soil Mix. Today we will talk about soil acidity for the peyote, as well as the use of coco coir and earthworm castings as ingredients for a peyote soil mix. In the part 1 of this video I give you two soil mix recipes. Both of them featured commercial potting soil as an ingredient. Well, it is possible to replace it by coco coir. If you take for instance my recipe using store-bought ingredients, which I showed you last week, and you replace the commercial soil by coco coir, that will give you a recipe like the one that appears now. The 25% commercial potting soil of my old recipe now become 25% coco coir. Of course, you could also mix the two, like for instance 10% of commercial potting soil and 15% of coco coir, so that the total of the two remains 25%. I'm currently experimenting with coco coir in my peyote mixes, and I will probably report on that in a future video, but in quite a distant future, as peyote take a long time to grow. One advantage of coco coir is that it retains water better. I would however only use coco coir if you are growing the plant indoors. Outdoors during the colder months, it could retain water for too long and possibly lead to rot. Other advantages of coco coir is better drainage and better aeration of the roots. The downside of coco coir is that it contains no nutrients, so the plant can only get nutrients from the stones in the soil mix, which is not much. So it is a good idea in that case to add some fertilizer. And that leads me to talk about fertilizers for peyotes. Due to the more mineral than organic nature of my peyote soil mix, I recommend giving the plant some liquid fertilizer. You can add fertilizer to the water every time you water the plant during the growing season. However, do not give them full-strength fertilizer. Just a third of the dose recommended on the bottle will be more than enough. Make sure that it is an organic fertilizer, and preferably one with low nitrogen. Nitrogen is the first of the three values on the NPK number, and ideally you want it to be the lowest of the three. Another fertilizing option is earthworm castings. And if you have watched my video on fertilizers, you will know I love castings. Castings work great for the San Pedro and also for the peyote. Providing there is no other organic ingredient in your soil mix, you can put 20 to 25% worm castings in it. Take into account this is for repotting peyotes, not for starting them from seeds. I have no idea if you can use worm castings for starting from seeds. Possibly, with much lower proportions, but in that case, that would be without sterilizing the soil, as you cannot sterilize worm castings. I will probably do some experiments in the future and let you know. In the meantime, if anyone has experience with the use of worm castings for starting from seeds, please let me know in the comment section below, and do mention the proportions as it is a critical point. In the part 1 of this video, I briefly mentioned about soil acidity for the peyote. In that respect, peyote is a little more demanding than San Pedro. With the San Pedro, you normally don't even have to think about whether or not the soil has the right acidity. With the peyote, it's open to debate. Peyote does not seem to like a soil that is too acid, and for that reason, many people add ground limestone to their soil mixes. You can use either agricultural lime or dolomite lime. It is a good idea to add a little bit of it to your mix, like roughly 1 handful of agricultural lime powder per 5 liters of soil mix or 1 US gallon. Don't overdo it, as the soil that is too alkaline can prevent nutrients from being absorbed by the plant. By the way, if you use the dolomite kind of lime, then you need to add a bit less of it to the mix than agricultural lime, as dolomite is more soluble. Agricultural lime is pulverized limestone, which is calcium carbonate, whereas dolomite is a calcium and magnesium carbonate, so it also contains magnesium, it's not just calcium. As an alternative to lime, you could also use finely crushed seashells, such as oysters, but even more common is eggshells. They are both made up of calcium carbonate and will raise the pH of your soil just like lime does. Whether you choose seashells or eggshells, both of them need to be finely crushed but not powdered. Some people like to test the soil with a pH meter or pH paper strips. I won't show you how to do that, there are tutorials on the net. I personally do not think it is necessary to test the soil, unless your peyotes are not doing well and you have been recommended by someone knowledgeable to check the pH of your soil. In any case, there are conflicting opinions as to what is the ideal pH for peyotes. Some aim around 7, others around 8. So in this video we've talked about coco coir, earthworm castings, and limestone as 3 different elements you can add to a peyote soil mix. Let's now try to integrate them all in an alternate recipe. Please keep in mind that this recipe is more suited to repotting peyotes rather than starting them from seeds. So the recipe is 1 part coarse sand, 1 part coco coir, 1 part pumice, remember you want its size 3 to 6 millimeters, that's 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, 1 part earthworm castings, and a handful of lime per gallon or 5 liters. You want to put a bit less of that if it's dolomite. You could also try the same mix, but with 2 parts coarse sand instead of 1 part. This would make the soil mix even faster draining. If you've had success with a different recipe, please share it with us in the comment section below. All for now. Please hit like if that video was helpful to you, and we'll see each other again next week.